The sleek, angular corridors of Kepler 186 F Prime space station gleamed with the characteristic polish of Xylar engineering. Suspended in orbit around a promising terrestrial world, the research and trade hub buzzed with activity from a dozen different species. Holographic displays cascaded information in various languages, while environmental systems hummed imperceptibly in the background, maintaining dozens of different atmospheric bubbles to accommodate the station's diverse inhabitants. In his undersized laboratory tucked away in a seldom-visited corner of the biological sciences wing, Dr. Eris Thorne hunched over a sample tray. His broad shoulders, evolved under Earth's punishing gravity, strained the fabric of his standard-issue lab coat as he carefully manipulated a transparent container holding what appeared to be ordinary soil. The microspectral analyzer before him showed something else entirely. Fascinating, he murmured to himself, making note of the molecular structure displayed on his screen. The native fungi of Kepler 186F demonstrated remarkable adaptability to various environmental stressors, capabilities that could potentially revolutionize medical compound synthesis if properly developed. Eris allowed himself a brief moment of excitement before the lab's communication panel chimed. The holographic face of Counselor Vexelia materialized, her crystalline features arranged in what passed for polite interest among the silicon-based Xylar. "Dr. Thorne," she said, her voice carrying the characteristic melodic overtones of translated Xylar speech. "The Biological Safety Committee requires your quarterly report by the end of this cycle. We note it has not been submitted." Eris straightened, trying not to wince as his back protested the sudden movement. "Counselor, I submitted the report 3 days ago through the official channels. This is the third time this quarter that my submissions have been misplaced." A subtle change passed across Vexalia's crystalline features, something that might have been disdain on a human face. "Perhaps your carbon-based emotional patterns disrupt your memory functions, Dr. Thorne. We have no record of your submission." Before Eris could respond, she continued, "Additionally, we must remind you that Corridor H7 will be experiencing atmospheric recalibration. Your species' respiration needs will not be accommodated during this time. Please plan accordingly." The communication ended before Eris could point out that H7 was the main access corridor to his laboratory, effectively cutting him off from his workspace for the duration of the recalibration. It wasn't the first time such oversights had occurred. Sighing, Eris downloaded his data to his personal device and began the lengthy process of saving his samples. He'd have to transport anything sensitive to secondary storage again. The corridor outside his lab was nearly empty as he locked the doors. Most of the station's researchers had already departed for their rest cycles, leaving only the soft glow of maintenance lighting to guide his way. As he navigated toward the central hub, a familiar voice called out, "Let me guess, another essential recalibration?" Chief Engineer Lena Petrova emerged from an access junction, wiping grease from her hands with a rag. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical knot, and her maintenance uniform bore the telltale signs of someone who'd spent the day crawling through service ducts. Eris nodded. "H7 this time. You'd think they'd eventually run out of corridors to recalibrate." Lena snorted. "At least you got warning. I just had my request for replacement parts denied again." Apparently, the water recycling system's progressive deterioration is within acceptable parameters. She mimicked the precise tones of Xylar speech with practiced accuracy. "Never mind that we're operating at 68% efficiency and dropping." They rounded a corner and nearly collided with the broad chest of Security Officer Jax Martinez. His uniform bore the distinctive blue stripe of human security personnel, a division consistently assigned to the least desirable tasks and shifts. "Inventory duty again?" Eris asked, noting the scanning device in Jax's hand. Jax's normally cheerful face bore the strain of someone trying very hard to maintain professionalism. 19th consecutive cycle. "Apparently, my Deathworlder instincts make me uniquely qualified to count supply crates in the lower holds." He lowered his voice, though it didn't stop them from assigning me a Xylar supervisor who questions every single scan. The three humans exchanged knowing glances. It was an unspoken routine, these brief encounters in corridors, sharing frustrations that could never be voiced in official channels. Headed to the Commons, Lena asked, "I could use a proper meal after today." Eris hesitated. "I should resubmit my report first. Wouldn't want the committee to think my carbon-based emotional patterns affected my work ethic." "I'll save you a seat," Jax offered. "The synthesizers are actually producing something edible tonight." As they parted ways, Eris couldn't shake the weight that had settled on his shoulders, a weight that had been growing heavier with each passing cycle. 7 Earth years he'd been on this station, contributing research, adapting to Xylar protocols, carefully navigating the subtle dismissals and bureaucratic obstacles placed before him. 7 years of proving his worth, only to be treated as a barely tolerated curiosity, the emotional Deathworlder attempting science. The central data hub was empty save for a single Morrisian technician who eyed Eris warily as he approached the terminal. The four-armed, avian-like being quickly gathered its tools and moved to the opposite side of the room. Eris pretended not to notice. After accessing his accounts, he discovered that not only had his report been lost, but his lab's already minimal budget allocations had been reduced by 15% for the next quarter due to failure to meet documentation requirements. By the time he reached the Commons area, his frustration had hardened into a familiar resignation. The large circular space was designed to accommodate multiple species in comfortable social settings, though in practice, the various groups rarely mingled. Eris spotted Lena and Jax at their usual table in the human section, a slightly higher gravity area with atmospheric composition adjusted to Earth standard. "That bad, huh?" Lena asked as he dropped into a seat beside her. "Budget cut." Again, Eris accepted the synthesized coffee Jax pushed toward him. 15% this time. 15. Lena's eyebrows shot up. "That's nearly criminal for a functioning lab." Jax leaned forward. "Speaking of criminal, I overheard something interesting during my exciting inventory duties. The Xylar are pushing through approval for a new asteroid mining operation. Massive allocation of resources. Let me guess, operated by a Xylar corporation?" Eris asked. "Naturally. And rumor has it they're pulling funding from less productive research initiatives to finance it." The implications hung in the air between them. Before anyone could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. A group of Talaxians, insectoid beings with heightened sensitivities to airborne particles, were gesticulating frantically to a Xylar administrator. Even from a distance, Eris could see the distinctive discoloration on their carapaces that indicated some kind of allergic reaction. Without thinking, he rose and approached the group, drawing a few surprised looks from other diners. "Excuse me," he said, addressing the clearly distressed Talaxians. "I'm Dr. Eris Thorne, Xenobiology. Those symptoms look like a reaction to particulate matter. May I ask when this began?" The Talaxians clicked rapidly among themselves before one stepped forward. 3 cycles ago. Station medical claims it is minor environmental adjustment." Eris frowned. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to scan the air around them with his personal device. The Talaxians nodded. The Xylar administrator's crystalline features hardened. "This is not your concern, Dr. Thorne. The matter is being handled according to protocol." "With respect, Counselor," Eris replied, studying the readings on his device. "Protocol seems to be failing these individuals." He turned back to the Talaxians. "There's an unusual fungal spore in the air around you, not native to this station. I'd be happy to collect samples and run an analysis in my lab." The administrator stepped between them. "That will not be necessary. The Biological Safety Committee will address this matter." "The same committee that's been addressing this for 3 cycles?" Eris couldn't keep the edge from his voice. "Your emotional response is noted, Dr. Thorne," the administrator replied coolly. "Perhaps it would be best if you return to your designated area." Eris felt Lena's hand on his arm, a gentle warning. With a tight nod, he stepped back, watching as the Talaxians were led away toward the medical bay, their distress still evident. One day, Lena murmured as they returned to their table, That condescending attitude is going to cost them. It already is, Eris replied, looking down at his device. Those spores match something I identified months ago, a mutation from standard terraforming fungi. I submitted a report about potential cross-contamination risks. Let me guess, Jax said darkly. Lost in the system? Eris didn't need to answer. They all knew too well how frequently human recommendations vanished into the bureaucratic void of Xyler administration. The following morning brought news that sent a ripple of unease through the human community on Kepler 186 F prime. Eris received the notification on his personal device while preparing for another day of work. The Xyler High Council had approved emergency budget reallocation measures. All non-essential research projects would have their funding reduced by 75%, effective immediately. The message continued with bureaucratic precision. To ensure maximum efficiency of remaining resources, new biological safety protocols will restrict access to planetary samples. All current specimens must be surrendered to central storage for cataloging and controlled distribution. Eris stared at the screen, the implications sinking in. His lab wouldn't just be crippled, it would be effectively shut down. Years of careful research, the promising fungal compounds he'd been developing, all of it would disappear into the black hole of Xyler's centralized management. By mid-morning, the human section of the Commons had become an impromptu meeting place, as others received similar notifications. Lena's engineering team had been denied critical replacement parts, deemed non-essential under the new budget constraints. Jax and his security colleagues found their patrol routes restricted to increasingly marginal areas of the station. They can't just do this, one of the younger researchers protested. There are interspecies agreements that are written and interpreted by Xyler legal experts. Jax finished for her. Trust me, they've covered themselves. Eris listened to the frustrated voices around him, feeling a strange calm settle over him. We need to follow the proper channels, he said finally, silencing the group. File formal protests, present the scientific case for continuity of research, demonstrate the economic value of our work. You think that will make a difference? Lena asked, skepticism clear in her voice. I think we need to prove we've tried, Eris replied. Document everything, every request, every denial, every procedural irregularity. And so began what the humans would later call the Paper War. For 2 weeks, Eris methodically worked through every administrative avenue available. He compiled comprehensive reports demonstrating the medical potential of his research, calculated the economic benefits that would accrue to the station from successful development, and even drafted proposals for shared credit with Xyler institutions. Each submission disappeared into administrative limbo. Meetings were scheduled, then rescheduled, then canceled due to priority conflicts. When he finally secured an audience with a junior member of the budget committee, the Xyler representative listened impassively before informing him that his concerns had been noted and would be taken under advisement. Lena faced similar obstacles when attempting to warn about the deteriorating environmental systems. Her carefully documented analysis of filter degradation and water quality metrics was dismissed as speculative and failing to account for Xyler engineering tolerances. Meanwhile, the mysterious ailment affecting the Talaxians spread to other species. What began as minor irritations, respiratory discomfort, skin rashes, became more widespread and persistent. The official medical response remained cumbersome and ineffective, bound by protocols that seemed designed more for documentation than treatment. It has drastically reduced lab space. Working with equipment he'd managed to hide from the central collection, Eris identified the source of the problem. A mutated spore from the asteroid mining operation, carried back on equipment and personnel. The station's environmental systems, suffering from Lena's predicted maintenance failures, were failing to filter the contaminants properly. He developed a simple treatment, a compound that neutralized the spore's allergenic proteins. But when he attempted to submit his findings, he was informed that unofficial research conducted outside approved protocols cannot be considered for implementation. The situation deteriorated further when a section of the water recycling system failed completely, causing shortages in multiple habitation zones. Lena and her team worked around the clock, implementing makeshift repairs without official authorization, only to have their actions labeled dangerous interference with essential systems in the official report, which attributed the successful resolution to automated repair protocols. That evening, a larger group than usual gathered in the human commons. The atmosphere was tense, faces tight with frustration and underlying fear. "This can't continue," Lena said, her voice low but intense. "The environmental systems are failing faster than I can patch them. The Xyler keep insisting everything is within parameters, but the readings don't lie. The security protocols are breaking down too," Jax added. 3 separate incidents of equipment malfunction in critical areas this week alone, but they're keeping it quiet. Eris listened, turning over the small data chip in his hand, the last samples he'd analyzed before being locked out of his laboratory entirely. "There's something else," he said finally. "Something in the last air and water samples I collected before the restrictions. A microorganism that doesn't match anything in our databases." "Another contaminant from the mining operation?" someone asked. "No." Eris shook his head. "This is different. It's adaptive, and it doesn't respond to standard Xyler sterilization procedures." "Have you reported it?" Lena asked. "Tried to. Was told my Deathworlder tendency toward catastrophizing was noted." A heavy silence fell over the group. It was Jax who finally voiced what many were thinking. "Maybe it's time we stop being so nice." The words hung in the air, dangerous and tempting. Eris felt something shift inside him. A lifetime of scientific caution and respect for procedure suddenly weighed against the evidence before him and found wanting. "Not yet," he said finally. "One more attempt through official channels. With everything we have. If that fails..." He left the sentence unfinished. The final attempt came 3 days later, when Eris managed to corner Counselor Vexalia outside a committee meeting. He presented his findings directly, bypassing the usual submission process, speaking rapidly before she could dismiss him. "The microorganism is silicon-consuming," he explained, showing her the data. "It's already in the environmental systems, and it's adapting to the station's sterilization measures. The normal Xyler protocols won't work against it." For a brief moment, he thought he saw something like concern flash across her crystalline features. Then her expression hardened. These findings were obtained through unauthorized research using restricted materials. They cannot be considered valid. "People will die if this isn't addressed," Eris pressed. "The entire station could be compromised. Your emotional hyperbole is inappropriate, Dr. Thorne." Vexalia's tone was dismissive. "If there were any genuine threat, our systems would have detected it. Perhaps it would be best if you confined yourself to your designated areas until you can approach matters with appropriate scientific detachment." As she walked away, Eris felt the last of his professional restraint crumble. That night, he called together Lena, Jax, and a select group of human department heads. "I've exhausted every official avenue," he told them, his voice steady despite the gravity of what he was proposing. "The station is in genuine danger, and the Xyler administration is either unable or unwilling to acknowledge it. We need to act." "What exactly are you suggesting?" asked Dr. Sarah Naveen, head of the human medical contingent. "Taking control of critical systems," Eris replied simply. "Implementing emergency protocols without authorization. Forcing the Xyler to acknowledge the threat and our solutions." The stunned silence that followed was broken by Lena. "That's mutiny," she said, though her tone held no condemnation. "It's survival," Eris countered. "For all of us, human and non-human alike." Slowly, methodically, they formed a plan. Lena would lead a team to secure the Environmental Control Center. Jax and his security personnel would neutralize the Xyler security forces, non-lethally, but effectively. Dr. Naveen would prepare the medical bay for potential casualties, and Eris would lead a small team to the main laboratories to synthesize enough of his neutralizing compound to treat the entire station. "Once we have control," Eris concluded, "we present our demands: equal representation on the council, restored funding for our projects, an official recognition of the threat we've identified and contained. And if they refuse, someone asked. Eris met each of their eyes in turn. Then we demonstrate that Deathworlders can be far more than just nice. The plan was set in motion during the station's night cycle, when minimal staff monitored the critical systems. Jax and his team moved first, using their intimate knowledge of the station's security protocols and the Xylar Guard's predictable response patterns to neutralize opposition with minimal force. The Xylar security forces, trained to follow rigid procedures, were unprepared for the improvisational tactics of humans who had evolved on a planet where adaptability meant survival. Simultaneously, Lena and her engineers entered the Environmental Control Center. The two Xylar technicians on duty barely had time to register surprise before they were secured. Within minutes, Lena had control of the station's life support systems, bypassing the bureaucratic safeguards with ease. Environmental controls secured. She reported over the secure channel. You were right, Eris. The contamination is widespread and accelerating. Eris led his team through the deserted corridors toward the main laboratories. The normally pristine surfaces showed subtle signs of corrosion, evidence of the microorganism he'd named chronomold for its ability to rapidly degrade technological systems. In some sections, lighting flickered ominously, and environmental readouts showed fluctuating values. The laboratories were locked down, but one of Eris's team, a quiet programmer who had endured years of Xylar condescension, bypassed the security in minutes. Inside, they found state-of-the-art equipment that had been denied to human researchers for years. Begin synthesis, Eris ordered, uploading the formula for his neutralizing compound to the central fabrication unit. Maximum production capacity. As the machines hummed to life, Eris opened a channel to all human teams. Status reports? Security zones 1 through 7 secured, Jax reported. Minimal resistance. Some non-human residents are sheltering in place. Others are actually helping us. Medical is ready, Dr. Naveen confirmed. We've already begun treating the worst affected Talaxians. They're responding well to your compound, Eris. Environmental systems are critical. Lena's voice was tense. The chronomold has penetrated deeper than we thought. I'm trying to isolate essential systems, but we're fighting a losing battle unless we can deploy the neutralizing agent soon. First batch coming off production now, Eris replied, beginning distribution through the ventilation system. He turned to the station's communication array. It's time to make our announcement. The face that appeared on screens throughout the station wasn't Eris's, but Lena's, a tactical decision. Her voice was calm and authoritative as she addressed the station's population. Attention all inhabitants of Kepler, 186 F Prime. This is Chief Engineer Lena Petrova speaking on behalf of the human contingent. We have temporarily assumed control of critical station systems to address an imminent threat to everyone on board. She explained the nature of the chronomold, its danger to the station's infrastructure, and the steps now being taken to neutralize it. The Xylar administration was informed of this threat, but chose to ignore it. We are now implementing emergency measures to save this station and everyone on it. Lena continued, her voice hardening slightly. Once the immediate danger is contained, we will transfer control back to a restructured administration under the following conditions. First, full restoration and increase of human research and maintenance budgets. Second, equal voting representation for humans on the station's governing council. Third, a public acknowledgement of the administration's failures and the human role in saving the station. The response from the Xylar High Council was swift and predictable. Outrage, accusations of terrorism, threats of severe consequences. But as chronomold continued to consume critical systems despite their denials, and as the humans' neutralizing compound began to show measurable results in treated sections, their position weakened. Non-human residents, initially frightened by what seemed like a human coup, began to see the truth as environmental conditions improved in treated areas while continuing to deteriorate elsewhere. Reports reached the human teams of Moraxians Talaxians, and even some junior Xylar officials speaking out in support of the emergency measures. The turning point came 18 hours into the crisis. A critical power junction in an untreated section failed catastrophically, plunging a quarter of the station into darkness and threatening life support for thousands of inhabitants. It was a human emergency team, led personally by Eris, who entered the highly contaminated area without the protective gear that other species required. Using their Deathworlder physiology, the very traits that had been dismissed as primitive, they stabilized the systems long enough for Lena's engineers to reroute power. Footage of humans working in conditions that would have killed any Xylar spread throughout the station. The narrative began to shift. 26 hours after the human takeover began, with chronomold containment reaching 60% and station systems stabilizing, the Xylar High Council requested negotiations. The meeting took place in the central conference room. Eris, Lena, and Jax represented the humans, facing the 5 members of the Xylar High Council across a table that suddenly seemed more equal than it ever had before. "You have created an unprecedented situation," began High Counselor Zexalia, her crystalline features arranged in what humans had learned to recognize as barely contained anger. Illegal seizure of control, coercion, threats. Saving thousands of lives, Eris interrupted calmly, addressing a critical threat that your administration repeatedly ignored, implementing a solution that works. The situation could have been handled through proper channels. "We tried proper channels," Lena cut in, placing a data pad on the table. 73 formal reports, 29 emergency notifications, 15 direct appeals. All documented, all ignored or dismissed. "The fact remains," another counselor began, "that once this emergency is resolved, there must be consequences for such actions." Jax leaned forward, his normally friendly face hard. "The consequences are already happening. Counselor, every being on this station now knows that you were warned and did nothing. Every being knows that humans saved them when your protocols failed. Those consequences can't be undone." The negotiations continued for hours. The Xylar attempted to minimize concessions, to create loopholes, to preserve their absolute authority. But their position was untenable. As reports continued to come in of successful chronomold containment and testimonials from non-human residents supporting the human actions, their resistance crumbled. By the time the new agreement was drafted, the humans had secured everything they demanded: equal representation on the council, restored and increased funding for their projects, official recognition of their role in saving the station, and immunity from prosecution for actions taken during the crisis. The signing ceremony was broadcast throughout the station. As Eris affixed his name to the document, he caught the eye of a Talaxian observer whose carapace now showed healthy coloration instead of the allergic response that had been dismissed for so long. The insectoid being inclined its head slightly, a gesture of respect that meant more than any official recognition. In the days that followed, the station underwent a transformation. Eris's laboratory was expanded and equipped with technology previously reserved for Xylar researchers. Lena was appointed director of station engineering with full authority to overhaul maintenance systems. Human security personnel under Jax's leadership were integrated into all sectors, their adaptive thinking now recognized as an asset rather than a liability. More subtle, but equally significant, was the change in daily interactions. The dismissive tone from Xylar officials disappeared, replaced by a cautious respect. Other species that had previously kept their distance from humans now sought them out, curious about these beings whose unpredictable nature had proved so valuable in a crisis. 2 weeks after the chronomold crisis, Eris stood at the observation window of his new laboratory, watching the activity in the main promenade below. Humans moved freely among other species, engaged in conversations that seemed genuinely collaborative rather than merely tolerant. "Quite a view," Lena commented, joining him at the window, literally and figuratively. Eris nodded. "Everything's changed. For the better? I think so." He turned to face her. "We don't have to pretend anymore. Don't have to make ourselves smaller, less capable, less Deathworlder. To be accepted." We just had to save everyone first, Jax added, entering with a datapad in hand. Small price to pay for respect. The three friends shared a moment of quiet understanding. They had crossed a line together, one they couldn't return from. The humans of Kepler, 186 F prime, would never again be merely tolerated curiosities, forced to navigate bureaucratic obstacles and subtle contempt. They had demonstrated their value in the most undeniable way possible. You know, Eris said thoughtfully, I think every civilization on this station will remember the day we stopped being nice and started being respected. Lena finished. Below them, the diverse life of the station continued, forever altered by the realization that the adaptability, resourcefulness, and yes, the Deathworlder instincts that had been dismissed for so long were precisely what had saved them all.